All right, I'm going to be breaking down a pitch by Shohei Ohtani. I'm going to be looking at every different body part and component of the pitch. I'll break it down from the concepts of stress, strain, and deformation. And then I'm going to compare it to a Clayton Kershaw pitch to compare how up leg and down leg plays a part in pitching. All right, let's start with Shohei Ohtani's front foot and what goes on here. You see during the lift, the front foot begins to yaw inwards. The yaw inwards over here, right? And it stays yawed inward right there throughout the stride, right? Still this way, coiled as a way to create stress. Then plant. It's a hard plant to the ground. Feel the impact, feel the input, because more input, more output, right? And as the stride's going on, it's letting the hip is opening the foot. The foot doesn't open itself. As the hip uncoils, the foot uncoils. And then it's hard impact. Right? And this yawed inward foot is creating strain on the knee and the hip, and more strain creates more deformation. All right, now let's look at the front knee, which is going to be pretty similar, right? With the inward yaw this way, right? Coiled towards the back hip, creating stress and strain on the back hip. More strain equals more deformation, which means a faster release of tension, which means a faster pitch, right? And then it opens with the hip, right? And I'll get into the up leg down leg thing later here, but when it releases here, it's not pulling back. A lot of coaches will teach you to kind of pull this knee backwards, like right here at release. But that's not what's happening. At release here, it's the hip is just going to rotate over the foot like that, over the knee, the hip's just going to rotate over the knee, right? And because this is his up leg, it's going to rotate more upwards like this over it, right? But once the hips are lined up together here, like in a straight, they're straight there, that's when where the hip's going to rotate over the front knee, like in a sprint. It's exactly like what happens in a sprint here, just rotating over the front there. All right, took the front hip. It's very similar to what I just said about the rotation here. Very similar to sprinting concepts, right? As soon as these are lined up, it's just gonna rotate over the front hip, like that. Let's move on to the back leg, because there's a lot more to get into. Starting with the back foot. We'll notice here as we're getting coiled, we're staying on the inside edge. And then throughout the stride, inside edge, right? The knee is on the inside of the foot the whole way, or inside edge. You'll see when we start to get coiled too, this foot is actually yawing this way to create a counter rotation against the front side. It's actually creating a counter rotation before the initial rotation even happens, as a way to create more strain in the back knee too, because more strain equals more deformation, which means a faster release of tension, faster pitch. So we're staying inside edge the whole way, and it's yawing this way. If it wasn't yawing this way, then the foot would actually start to move out this way as the hip gets coiled, but it doesn't. It stays straight, which means it's actually yawing inwards. Like I said, which is a counter rotation. Counter rotation is what's going to stop the initial rotation before so the hip just doesn't do a full circle around here. All right, then we go to the stride out, and you'll see the foot starts to roll inwards here. It's not pushing, it's rolling from outside edge to inside edge, or more so just inside edge to more inside edge, right? So the foot's gonna roll, just rolling this way as the stride happens. It's not extending, it's not pushing, it's rolling. And then you'll see, because of the roll, the toe's actually gonna drag for a little bit. Much like in a start of a sprinter, an elite sprinter, they're gonna roll to the inside edge, and the toe is gonna drag because they're not pushing, they're rolling. Let's go to the back knee. You'll see, because this is his back leg is his down leg, that when he gets loaded, it's a squat. He squats a lot into it, right? If that was his up leg, he'd be hinging more than he is squatting. But since that's his back leg, since his back leg is his down leg, he's going to squat into it a lot. And you'll see this is where this exemplifies a lot of sprinting components into it, right? There's a squat, then there's shin angle change, right? Shin angle started here, and it's changing down this way, right? The shin angle changes, and as the shin angle changes, that allows this hip to rotate forward, right? Because it's not a push, it's hip rotation forwards. That's what's creating the stride here. And you'll see the back knee rolls inwards as the foot rolls inwards, right? Because the shin angle change is happening on a lateral component here. So it's rolling this way. It's not extending, right? This knee never extends. There's a bend here, right? It's segmented. There's here. Let's see if I can change the color on this. But it's a bend here. It's a class 3 bend. Oh, what'd I do? Here we go. See the bend there? Right? A lot of people teach triple extension, right? Like, that should be a straight line there, right? From the ankle to the hip should be a straight line, but it's not, because the knee is bended. And because the knee is bended, that allows the hip to keep rotating forward, right? Hip started right here and is rotating all the way this way, right? Because this doesn't extend. If it extends, then the hip gets cut out and it can't create this massive stride length that Shohei Ohtani gets. So, shin angle change, rolls inwards, hip goes. What this is actually doing so this front knee does the same thing, or the back knee does the same thing as the back foot does, and it's also creating a counter rotation towards the front knee here, like to create more strain here in the hip. So it's rotating inwards here, right? By rotating inwards, I mean it's staying straight because this front half is rotating inwards, and if it wasn't creating strain, then this whole knee would rotate outwards with the hip. But it stays straight here, and then as the stride goes on, it really starts to yaw inwards here, create more strain in the hip. And then as the shin angle changes, it creates a stumble reflex, which is another sprinting concept here that applies a lot because it's not a push. Hip rotates forward, which stumbles him onto this front foot here, right? So it's kind of like a fall. So he's kind of falling here to the front foot. He's not pushing out. He's rotating the hip and falling forward. So let's if we focus on the back hip with it, just as the shin angle changes, this hip rotates forward. It's also going to drop too a lot because, like I said, that this is his back leg. So as he squats, it's dropping a lot. And as it's rotating forward, then it starts to go up again at the release. But as it's rotating forward, it creates a stumble reflex, which allows him to get this massive stride length, right? He starts here and he goes all the way here. And because it's his down leg, he can create more length with it. This is also yawing this way as a counter rotation to the front hip, right? You see it starts to open up here, right? Open hips now. Goes from coiled here. The front hip is coiling inwards, and this hip is actually trying to resist the front hip coil, right, to create as much strain as possible in that hip. And then hip drops, rotates forward, comes even, rotates over the front foot. All right, let's go look at the upper body now. Starting with the throwing arm, we'll see the arms drop to the waist once the stride begins, and it pulls out of the glove here. You'll see the arm is going to stay bent the entire way through, right? He's going to pull with the elbow here. It's an elbow pull, so that elbow is pulling it this way. It's not a hand pulling it out this way, right? Right, so elbow is pulling. And you'll see right here, the scap is actually going to load the ball here. Right here, the scap gets engaged, and it pulls the arm back this way, and it pulls the ball and the arm into a into a more horizontal position right here, right? Because it's kind of vertical down here. Then the scap gets engaged and it pulls it to a horizontal position. And it's that V slot right there that a lot of coaches talk about. It's the V slot. Both arms out, and both of them are bent. And then the arm is actually going to externally rotate the ball upwards. And as it's doing that, the ball is staying facing the third base. Yeah, it's not facing the batter or the target at all. It's facing away, and that's to create more strain here in the shoulder, which again creates more deformation. So the stress here is moving the ball away, which creates strain in the shoulder, which is going to create more deformation at release, because the more strain you release, the more deformation you get. Right? And then you'll see here another important part is the xiphoid, right? Right there in the chest. Let me change the color here. Right here in the chest is going to lead the ball, right? Once you start to turn the hip, the xiphoid here, the chest, is going to be in front of the shoulder and in front of the elbow there, right? The xiphoid here is going to lead the ball this way. And then you'll see as release happens right here, the scap is going to unload and extend the arm away from the body here. So right here, scap unloads, right? It's still coiled. Or it's the scap is still coiled here, and then boom, it unloads, which allows the arm to extend out this way. So loaded scap and then unloaded scap. If we want to look at the front arm, see what happens here. Front arm, it's a lot more simple. It's also going to drop down to the hip here. It's going to extend out with the throwing arm and the stride. It's going to extend out. And then right here, it's going to fold. And it's going to fold to allow the xiphoid space to move, right? Because if this arm stays extended out here, then the xiphoid can't move because it's blocking its path. So it's going to fold in to allow the xiphoid here, the chest, to move forward. And it's also helping create this stride here. The xiphoid moves forward. Right? And then the front shoulder here is going to stay pointed at the target at release here and all the way through release. Right? Once the release is all over, then it'll start to kind of fade away in like response to the body's momentum. But at release here, it's staying pointed to the target all the way through. All right, now I want to compare the up leg and down leg from Shohei Ohtani and Clayton Kershaw. So Shohei Ohtani's down leg is his back leg, his right leg. That's his down leg. And his up leg is his front leg, his left leg. Same thing is true for Clayton Kershaw down here. The only difference is he's a left-handed pitcher, so his back leg is his up leg and his front leg is his down leg. Okay, so let's see how that actually affects the pitching and how it affects the instruction that you have to give. So mainly the first thing that happens where the difference is clearly visible is how they get loaded. So Kershaw here, to get loaded, is going to hinge a lot more than squat, right? Look how far this body hinges forward, how far like the shoulder will compress to the knee a lot more than Ohtani does. It hinges more than Ohtani's hinges. His body is basically straight up here. There's not a lot of hinge at all. But Kershaw, hinges the upper body towards it. And then you'll also see that Kershaw actually does get a really long stride for his up leg, but it's not going to be as much because it is his up leg here, and his down leg is going to be here, right? So he doesn't quite stride quite as much as Ohtani does. But you'll see he does still create a stumble reflex here, right? As the knee goes in, the hip goes, the foot rolls inwards. It's creating a stumble onto this leg here. Then you'll see at land here, the front leg wants to keep the body down, right? Right here, you can see the front leg wants to keep the body downwards. So as Ohtani rotates over top like that, over his front leg, as he rotates over top, Kershaw wants to keep it down right here. He's fully released, and it wants to keep it down. So he doesn't create this straight leg and pull back like a lot of coaches teach, because he can't as much as he does. That pull there. So the biggest thing is teaching the load. So you don't want to teach someone that's pitching off of their down leg to hinge, and you don't want to teach someone that's pitching off their up leg to squat when they get loaded.